My name is Troy Taylor, and I want to welcome you to our second installment for our new video channel on YouTube. I wish I could take you somewhere on location, but I don't know about where you are, but here in Illinois, we're under about a foot of snow. So it's kind of hard to go on location right now, but the good thing about having a foot of snow on the ground is that it gives you a lot of time to read. I've gotten a lot of questions and requests, some of them kind of weird, actually, since we put out a call for people to send in questions for maybe an Ask Troy segment. But one of them that I thought it would be kind of fun to cover today is books. People are always asking, what kind of books do you read? As a writer, I read pretty much all the time, and always trying to uncover something different about maybe a subject that I don't know that much about. So what I thought I would do is tell you about a few of the books that I've read fairly recently that I could recommend for people who have an interest in various types of American history. The first book I want to tell you about is a book called The Last Greatest Magician in the World by a guy named Jim Steinmeier. I'm a big fan. I've read, I think, all of his books. He also did a book called Hiding the Elephant, which is an essential book on the history of magic. And this book is actually about Howard Thurston, who was kind of a lesser known magician, I guess, to people today who think about Houdini from the early 1900s as being kind of the main magician of the time period. But Thurston was actually, man, it was much more popular and actually reached a much wider audience than Houdini ever did. But somehow it was Houdini's name that stuck with us after all this time. It's a great book, and I highly recommend it if you have any interest at all in history or American magic. Definitely worth the read. Another book that I read recently was a book called Neil Thompson. It's called A Curious Man, and it's a biography of Robert L. Ripley, the guy from the Ripley's Believe It or Not cartoons. Before I read this book, I really didn't know anything about Robert Ripley, other than I'd been to the couple of the museums a few times, and of course I read the comic strips like many of us did. Growing up as a kid, the stories that he presented were pretty amazing. When you know the story behind them, they're even better. Ripley traveled all over the world. He was a cartoonist in the early 1900s, worked for the newspapers. Traveled all over the world, became a multi-millionaire drawing cartoons. And believe me, by the time I finished this book, I wished I had been a cartoonist in the early 1900s. It's a great book, and again, another one that I highly recommend. A book that I just finished that came out recently, a third book by Nicholas Pastor, is called The Axe Murders of Saxtown. I can't recommend this book enough. It's a story from Illinois that a lot of people don't know. I've actually written about this a couple of times in a couple of my Illinois books, as a matter of fact. It's about a series of, or actually a spree, an axe murder spree that took place in Millstadt, Illinois, which is near Belleville, down on the metro east across the river from St. Louis. The murders had never been solved. But what made this book so compelling is the way that the author wrote it. He really gets inside the time period, really takes you into the 1870s. Really, you get the way of life that was being lived by mostly German farmers at that time. But the one thing I think I loved about it the most is that this was a standard history book. This was never meant to be ghost stories or a ghost book, but the author does actually reference the ghost stories in the book. Talks about the hauntings that came in the wake of these unsolved axe murders. So that really impressed me, and it's a really well-written book. It's a great story, and I would highly recommend it. So anyway, that wraps it up for this time. We'll be back again. Leave your questions, leave your comments. Don't worry about the weird requests. The questions and comments will be fine. And we'll have another Ask Troy segment coming up in the near future. So thanks again for watching, and this is Troy Taylor from American Hauntings.